All right, guys, welcome to another session with me. And just to introduce myself again, my name is Hafiz, and I've been doing IELTS session live here on this YouTube channel. And basically, today we're going to transition to academic writing, right? So, for those of you who are watching and in need of some guide on IELTS writing on how to achieve the highest score that you can get, right? Which is about a 9, right? Or at the very least an 8. Then this session is for you, right? So please do stand by. I'm Hafiz, an IELTS tutor from HZAT Education. Today we will be covering IELTS academic writing specifically for task 1. All right, now before we take a look deeper into the question types and like the different approaches, etc., I want to give just a clearer understanding of the question itself, right? What is IELTS writing task one? Now, as you may know, when it comes to task one, it's basically a summary question. You will be given an illustration of some sort, a graphic, a table, a map, any kind of illustration, and you will be tasked to summarize all the essential information. We will take a look at a sample question later on, and hopefully we do have time to go through it thoroughly, right? But for the start, I would like to actually give an overview, like a comprehensive overview of what you actually need to know when it comes to this question, right? Okay, of course, when it comes to IELTS Task 1 writing, we have to take a look at the grading rubric, right? Because we take this test knowing that someone will grade our writing, so we need to know what the examiners are looking for. That's what we also, that is a crucial aspect of doing an IELTS, right? So here I have in front of me the publicly available grading rubric for IELTS writing task one. Right? There are 4 categories, and we will talk a little bit more in depth about each one because you need to understand what they are looking for each category. You will be graded based on all of these categories. It is crucial that you are fully aware of what they are. So let's start with the first one, which is task achievement. Right. So task achievement is exactly like the title says, is whether you achieve what the question is asking. So in task one, right, what is the question? You are told to summarize essential information or basically highlighted information, important information that you can see from the graph or illustration that they provide. So are you able to kind of highlight those kind of things? Now, if you take a look, let's start off with the bottom grade, right? So usually the average grade is around a 5 or 6. So let's take a look at 5. It says here generally addresses the task. The format may be inappropriate in places, recounts detail mechanically with no clear overview. There may be no data to support the description. So if you score low in IELTS writing, one of the reasons could be this, is that you didn't get all the information that you are expected to mention in your answer. So it is crucial to kind of see the graph clearly and kind of just highlight all the important information. We'll take a look how that looks like in a bit, right? Um, the next thing is about coherence and cohesion. So coherence and cohesion, another word for this is basically structure and flow. So let me actually write that down. Everybody can remember structure. Oh, yeah, that's too big. That, that. Oh, we can, yeah, by doing this. There we go. Structure and flow, right? What does that mean? Structure and flow. It's how you structure your paragraph. That's the first thing. And those two are distinctly different, structure and flow. Structure is the layout, like what does paragraph one contain? what does paragraph 2 contain, paragraph 3, paragraph 4. And speaking of which, when it comes to IELTS writing, there is actually a template. And if you check out the link at the bottom in the description below, you can check out some of the program that HZ Education offers. And we offer really good templates for you guys to easily follow. It's very easy to understand and you can easily follow it, and it can guarantee you a high score, at least a 7, if you follow it precisely and you basically practice using it, right? Okay, structure, basically the layout. What does paragraph 1 contain, paragraph 2 contain? We will talk specifically about what each paragraph will contain. We'll cover that template a little bit as well, right? The next is flow, right? Flow is a lot more challenging to achieve, right? If you kind of take a look at uh, band 9 here, right? Uses cohesion in such a way that it attracts no attention, skillfully manages paragraphing. So it uses cohesion. So cohesion basically means when you read your answer, it just flows, on your tongue. It like you don't feel those kind of moments where you're just forced to stop in places that doesn't fit right, right? You've probably been in those kind of situation when you're reading a book, right? And you are reading so fluently. It's just like flowing. It's flowing and you just can't stop. But on some cases when you're reading article or even newspapers, there are moments where you go like, okay, I'm reading a sentence, but then I'm forced to stop because of either a full stop or the transition just doesn't feel right, etc. Right? That's basically flow, right? How smooth it is. Your answer kind of just read from beginning to end. That's flow, right? So it's pretty crucial. We'll also take, of course, we'll discuss everything that we are talking about right now in a practice question. Next thing is lexical resource. Now, this is the part that I've seen a lot of students quite underestimate, right? Lexical resource is basically vocabulary, but similar to the previous category, there are also two parts of vocabulary. The first is vocabulary range, and the second is vocabulary precision, right? So let's write that down. Range and precision. Now I'm going to just leave this quite big at the top because this will also apply to our last category, right? So when it comes to lexical resources, basically how you use your vocabulary. Right? The first part is the range. So what is the range? That means you're using a wide variety of vocabulary, right? If you do a lot of repetitions, that's just not gonna get you a high band ever. That's never gonna get you a high band. But you gotta showcase that vocabulary knowledge, that vocabulary variety that you have learned, right? And it connects to the second part, precision. So you may know a lot of vocabulary, you may know tons of vocabulary, but using it precisely, accurately, is a completely another thing. Let me show you a quick example, right? This is just an illustration. I'm not going to use an IELTS question just yet. So if we take a look at a word like amplify, right? The word amplify means to increase, to enlarge something, but this is usually for non-physical things, right? Non-physical enlargement. So what does that mean? That means if you use it for things that are physical, this pretty much becomes inappropriate, this word. Right? So that is precision. So you can amplify your voice, you can amplify stress, you can amplify your burden, right? But you cannot, let's say, amplify your hair. You cannot amplify your clothes. That just won't work, right? So it has to be applied to non-physical things. But that's just one type of example. There are so many words that you can easily misuse, right? It might feel fitting when you put it in because all you were aware of is the definition, right? Okay, this word means this. So if I use this in this way, it sounds correct, right? But specifically when you look at the substance, it's actually not commonly used like that. But that's precision. It's very important. You take a look at band 9, uses a wide range of vocabulary with very natural and sophisticated control of lexical features. Rare minor errors occur only as slips. So they do allow a little bit of mistake. It's very little. That the room is very small, trust me, right? But if you make like two mistakes and the vocabulary is quite significant, it's at places where you're trying to emphasize something, that's gonna be a huge drop, right? In your band, it's just gonna go down. All right, last but not least, very important, grammatical range and accuracy. So similar to lexical resource, the grammar here has range and precision as well, right? Now there have been a lot of cases where natives, people from America, Europe, takes the IELTS exam and they still can't get a perfect score, right? English has been their native tongue, but they still can't get a perfect score. Does that mean they make mistakes in their grammar? Not necessarily, right? So the first, like I said, is range. Range means just how well you know your grammar. So you might not make any grammar mistake, but there's also the precision, right? So that means the variety of the grammar that you use. Remember, in grammar, there's active structure, passive structure, compound sentences, simple sentences, tenses, etc. So if your answer is all grammatically correct, but you're only using like one variety of grammar or two variety of grammar, no more than that, you're never gonna go above 7, right? You might even go lower than that. So there is that importance of making sure that the way that you write has a variety in it, right? So that is something that we all need to be aware of when it comes to the IELTS writing. Now, a lot of these are also used for task two, right? I'm only going to mention that because we're not going to do any task two question today. And in that regards, right, this is pretty important for anyone to take the test to note, right? Always keep this in mind because remember, this is what you will be created upon, right? This is like based on, sorry. This is what you will be created based on. And so if you follow everything that is written here, like the band 9 row, you're gonna get that score, right? So let's actually take a look at what that means. Now let's jump straight into a question. Of course, before we do get into a question, right? I already have a sample question here. There are a couple of things that need to highlight as well. Okay? So let's have a side note here, right? Okay, let's have a side note here. Right. So there is an approach that you need to take when it comes to the IELTS Task 1. And this approach is highly recommended, right? Do not underestimate this. Number one is spend uh, a few minutes. I would say you can take 1 minute if you are quite good at it, 3 minutes, 5 minutes max, right? Spend a few minutes looking at the graph in question, right? Of course, sometimes it's not a graph, and whatever is the illustration. Okay, so one of the biggest mistake that any participant, any test taker of IELTS to make when you're doing academic writing test one is you immediately try to write the answer, right? You didn't kind of have a good look at the graph first. That's a big mistake. Remember, one of the criteria is task achievement. Did you answer the question? And the only way that you can guarantee that is if you actually understand what you're looking at. So you need to look at the graph first. So let's do that right now and kind of just illustrate on how you need to do this, right? Of course, first things first, read the introduction, right? The introductory line. There's always an introductory line in the question. You have to read it, make sure you understand it, right? So here the graph and table below give information about water use worldwide and water consumption in two different countries, right? So that means there are two different types of charts, right? And this is one of those question type that are leaning towards the difficult side or really difficult side. So there are actually two different types, right? So basically these two have different values, completely different values, right? So if you kind of don't check, you might miss that. And the first one is a line graph, right, or a dotted graph entitled Global Water Use by Sector. So let's take a look at all the features, the legends. Pay attention to those, right? So the first things first is the y-axis. Okay, on the y-axis, you get the area. Okay, so that's the area, and then on the x-axis, you get the year. Doesn't say year, right? But that's obviously a year. Okay, and then what is actually on the chart is our three, right, sectors. So the first one is agriculture, okay, and second one industrial use, second one is domestic. Okay, now I've taken a clear look at the first chart. Let's move on to the second chart. So the second chart here, it says water consumption in Brazil and Congo. Well, the two countries are Brazil and Congo. All right. So what are the main features here? There's population, there's irrigated land, there's water consumption per person. Water consumption per person. So population, of course, in millions, irrigated land in kilometer squares, and the water consumption per person, that's in cubic meters, right? So that's all the things that you have to immediately check first. Now I know that's like, oh yeah, this is reading, but trust me, right? You can easily misinterpret the chart that you are given if you don't check thoroughly. All right. Now going back to the task at hand, right? What do you actually need to do when it comes to the first step, right? So first things first is highlight the interesting information or feature. Right? Highlight it. So what does that mean? Interesting information and feature. What IELTS examiners are looking for are not data or numbers or information that is kind of like trifle. Right? They don't want like something that's consistent. Right? If you see a high jump or a significant difference, right, or a huge anomaly, those are the interesting information. Those are the interesting features, right? And you have to be careful in regards to what you actually write down in your answer, because you do have to highlight, like, or kind of show that it's a significant feature, right? That's there's a clear difference in our a uniqueness to the data, to the information that you have highlighted, right? So for example, right, we can clearly see, right, one of the biggest thing that we can see is that agriculture, look at that, that's like the highest in kilometer, that cubic kilometers, or yeah, in cubic kilometers, right? Agriculture is the highest, second is industrial use, and the smallest is domestic use, right? So if we want to keep it in the interesting side, definitely keep it to domestic use being like the smallest usage and agriculture being the highest, right? And this is a consistent trend. As you can see, there are no changes from 1900 to 2000, right? That's the main feature, for example, right? And if we take a look at the table, right, you can also clearly see that there is a uniqueness in some of the data, or at least when we compare them, right? So first, take a look at the population. Look at the significant difference between the population of Brazil and Democratic Republic of Congo, right? Look at the huge difference between irrigated land of the two countries, right? Also the water consumption. So they're all significantly different. So, for example, if you have a different version of this chart where the numbers are like very small in difference, that's something that you probably have to question yourself. Like, is that interesting enough to write? Right? So that's why it's very important to plan it out first. And that is going to be the next point, right? Sometimes if you are not used to IELTS questions like this, right? Highlighting the main feature won't be enough. You have to plan them. So what does planning mean? of course, planning all of your contents. What main features are you actually going to put in here? So if you are a beginner, if you're still practicing, what you can do is you list out all the features that you think are important. Now, I've given you the standard of what makes a feature very important, right? Significant difference, obvious uniqueness, etc., etc. Right? Those information must be included, all of them. Right? If it's like something that is very difficult to notice from the graph, it's highly likely that you don't need to put that in, right? So after that, like if you feel like, oh wait, that those are actually a lot of features, right? Here is where that's where you basically need to carefully plan out your answer. So that means like, uh, what will you write? Sorry, let's put that in mind. What will you write in every paragraph, right? Of course, there's a template, so we'll talk a little bit about that, right? What will you write in every paragraph? What data will you show, right? Etc. Etc. Now, I'm gonna just mention this straight up right now. When it comes to task one, do try to write more than less, right? There are different recommendations that you might have heard, right? I personally would recommend you to write at least 160 words, right? No less than that, right? So try to go over 160, right? I know in the question itself, we should write at least, if I'm not mistaken, 125 words, right? Sorry, was it 250? Well, whatever is no, actually 125 or 150. Whatever is written in that question, go way over it, right? Do not go less. The more the better, right? Of course, there is the aspect of the rubric that we just discussed, so that can come a little bit later. That can You can kind of check after you have made sure that you've written more than 160, right? Write more, not less. Okay. All right. And then after that, right, after the third one, then you can start drafting. Right? Now, when I say drafting, I don't mean right just write out your answer, right? Think about each sentence before you write it. Now, if you take the paper-based test, one of the most annoying things that can happen to you is that you start writing your answer and you go, wait, that doesn't sound right. You raised it, and even worse is that sometimes you have already written like one long paragraph, and once you're done, you read it out loud. Your mind goes, that's a lot of errors. That doesn't make sense. You erase the whole thing, and your papers start becoming very dirty. Right? So you don't want to do that in a real life test, especially paper-based tests. So always remember to try and think about your sentence first. Think about your sentence first. Ask yourself, does it make sense? Right? What structure, what grammar am I going to use? Am I going to use active sentences? What kind of vocabulary will I try to use, or how will I highlight the information? Right? And then once you are confident with that sentence, then you can write it down. Right? Now, when it comes to the paragraph itself, right? You can. There are different recommendations, but I would recommend 4 to 5 paragraphs. This is max, by the way. 5 paragraph is the absolute maximum, right? And usually the fifth paragraph is just going to be a repeat of an overview of the chart itself, right? So going to be a repeat. You don't need more than five. And a lot of people would try and do just 4, right? And remember, this is a summary. So as long as you have one paragraph that is an overview, right? One paragraph that kind of one paragraph that introduced the first thing, of course, then one paragraph that's an overview, and then the rest are the substances that you're presenting, right? That is more than enough, right? But if you want to kind of just add one more, just have another overview, just written differently, then you can add the fifth paragraph at the end, right? So it's almost like a conclusion, but not exactly, because in a summary, you usually won't write it in the form of a conclusion, just like more like an overview. So it still counts as a summary. Okay. All right. Now this is all the step. This is all the approach that you need before you answer the task one question. After that, it's just making sure that you keep on checking your answer. So not by checking, I don't mean wait until the very end and then check, right? Literally try to check every sentence. If you're practicing, you're still practicing, check every sentences that you write, right? Once you've done with one sentence, read it again. Check that it makes sense, right? Check that you don't make any grammar or even worse, spelling mistakes, right? Check that your lexicon are appropriately used. Check that you're not repeating a certain word too often, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now, to kind of just show you guys, the easiest way is to show you how an answer look for this chart. So I've already written the answer here at the bottom, right? So that's what we're gonna try and take a look. I'm gonna put it on the side so that we can kind of see, right? All right. So here I've written just 4 paragraphs, right? And I'm gonna show you basically what each paragraph contains and how we can use the rubric that we just talked about in the beginning and try to grade it ourselves right now, right? Live. Okay, so the first paragraph, as you can see already, this is the introduction, right? Now, for anyone new, please do not forget that you do not write your own introduction. All you need to do is you need to paraphrase this part. So the introductory line, right, that I mentioned in the beginning, that every question will give you, that is your introduction paragraph. All you have to do is just rephrase it. That's it, right? Just rephrase it. Do not write it word by word. Now, there will be moments when you take the test and there will be like technical terms that are difficult to change. That's fine. So as long as you change the structure of the sentence, so as long as you kind of, you know, shift the words around and of course still making it grammatically correct, right? But what you should not do is try to come up with your own original introduction. You don't need to do that. That's just a waste of time, right? So let's read that the introduction here. The charts compare the amount of water used for agriculture, industry, and homes around the world, and water use in Brazil and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, first things first, right? Just to show you guys, like how this is going to be a recurring theme. Like I said in previous session as well, IELTS love paraphrasing, and in writing, it's your turn to paraphrase. So in the introductory line here, it says graph and table, right? But in the answer, I use charts. Okay. In the introductory line, it says give information, and here in the answer, I just say compare the amount. So completely different words, but still maintain the same essence. It's still giving the same information, right? For use for agriculture, industry, and homes around the world. So all that is done differently here, right, is just literally specifying the legends. So there's water use for agriculture, industry, and homes, right? But in the introductory line here, it doesn't say that. And water use in Brazil and the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the introductory line, it just says different countries, but in the answer, it's specified. Right? So just to stop right there for a second and compare it with the answer rubric, right? So first things first is the task fulfillment. Of course. Now I know usually when it comes to task achievement, we'll need to look at the answer in this entirety, but this is just for demonstration, right? Task achievement. So for the introduction line, remember the main task for the introduction paragraph is simply to paraphrase the question line, right, or the introductory line. That's it. If you have paraphrased that successfully without adding anything out of context, without using any information that might not visible on the chart, which I will also emphasize later on, and basically just only contain things that are in the questions. That's it, right? Then you have fulfilled that task, and we've already established that, right? When we were just highlighting now that we did not use a lot of the words in the introductory line. Right? The structure of the paragraph remains the same. It's active, right? And one thing that I will highlight is that when it comes to the introduction, stick with present simple, right? Because that part is what you are trying to summarize right now, right? But once you dive into the data, right, it will depend on the data, but a lot of data are always in the past. As you can see, this is from year 1900 to 2000. So once you dive into the data, then it becomes past tense, right? Please keep that in mind. Sometimes you will have data that projects the future, right? It might be a very recent data, so you might need to use future tense in some cases, right? But a lot of them are usually past tense. Only the first paragraph is in the present tense. Okay. All right. So now let's move on to the coherence and cohesion. So let's try and read that out loud, right? Does it feel like it flows in the tongue? Right? Does it feels like it rolls off right off the tongue? Charts compare the amount of water used for agriculture, industry, and homes around the world, and water used in Brazil and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, not exactly, right? One of the reason being is because of the lexical resources, right? Oh, well, not exactly lexical resources, but also coherence and cohesion, but it connects with lexical resources. And what is that? It's the word and, right? So this one was difficult just slightly, but this is just to demonstrate to you, right? So this is what I meant earlier when I said about repetition. And if you take a look at this sentence, there's like one, two, three ends. Right now, that's not a bad amount of repetition. It's not, right? But it can be better. Usually for IELTS, the recommendation number of repetition, like throughout the entire essay, is usually two. If you can avoid more than two repetition, you your whole answer should pretty much be cohesive. Right? It should be flowing. Of course, again, like I said, it connects with the lexical resource, right? When it comes to conjunctions, there are a lot of conjunctions, of course, right? As well as also other than, if you want something contradictory, on the other hand, while, meanwhile, etc., etc., right? So in here, and is used three times, right? So the cohesiveness, I might obviously not get a nine, right, in that regards because I did uh, too many repetition for the word "and." Well, technically, it counts as too many because, as I said, the recommended number is about two, right? Okay, lexical resource, right? We already talked about that. Grammatical range and accuracy. Now, because this is literally just one sentence, right? Like the entire paragraph, but it's compound, right? So it's difficult to see whether the grammatical range and precision, can be evaluated thoroughly just in this paragraph. But the important thing here right now for just the first paragraph is that there are no grammatical mistakes. Okay, so just to kind of review that, the first paragraph, right? Paraphrase the question line, right, or introductory line. That's all you need to know. Do not add anything new. Okay, do not add anything new at all. All right, now let's move on to the second paragraph. Now, this is where we start to kind of see the template, right? And for all task one questions, you can literally just follow this structure. Now, this is word structure, so the cohesive part, right? The second paragraph usually is an overview. Let's try that second paragraph of overview of data. Now, what does that mean? It describes just the overall trend, right? It just described the significant trend, of course. Like I said at the beginning, when you're planning the data, only highlight the significant features, right? So in the second paragraph, we're just writing that trend, right? You can see here. Let's read it out loud. It is clear that global water needs rose significantly between 1900 and 2000, and that agriculture accounted for the largest proportion of water use. We can also see that water consumption was considerably higher in Brazil than in Congo. Now, do note that there is no like almost like overlapping information, right? So, for example, here I mentioned that agriculture accounted for the largest proportion of the water use. I did not add that the lowest being domestic use, right? I did not add, or that lower than that is industrial use. Basically, outside of agriculture, right, the others are pretty low, right? That's already implied here. So you don't need to add to that paragraph saying that, let's say, for example, and that agriculture accounted for the largest proportion of water use, while domestic use contributed for the smallest portion. You don't need to mention that, right? Because we've kind of already identified the legends in the introduction, so that is automatically implied. Similarly to the table, right? We can also see that water consumption was considerably higher in Brazil than in Congo, and you can see that we have not specified anything just yet. That's the second paragraph. It's just an overview of of the data, right? Overview or trend. You do not need to give specific data just yet. Don't force yourself to give numbers in the second paragraph. Focus on the trend. There are dates, but usually it's just gonna be the x-axis, right? If you get a chart, you can include the x-axis, right? But you do not need to add any of the y-axis, the numbers, the specific details. Why? Because that will come in the next paragraph, right? Okay, but let's take a look first at the rubric, right? Now, um, I'm just going to highlight it first, right? Take a look at the start of the sentence here. It is clear, right? The previous paragraph starts with the charge comparison. It starts with the subject, but in the second paragraph, it starts with a pronoun, right? So that already kind of show a range of grammatical use. That's what that rubric part means, right? If you were to write a different kind of answer, and start the second paragraph with um, the table shows, right? Or global water rose significantly between 1900, right? If you kind of repeat that same structure for almost every paragraph, you start with a subject, right? And you kind of name that subject as well. That doesn't show grammatical range, okay? And you can see that in almost every paragraph, it's different, right? In the third and the fourth paragraph, it is actually the same, right? But like I said, the repetition, as long as you don't exceed two, right, it should be fine. Would still allow you to get seven or higher, right? Okay, but basically the point is just that. Got to make sure that you show a range of grammar use. Okay, so it is clear that global water needs rose significantly between 1900 and 2000, and that agriculture accounted for the largest proportion of water use. We can also see, and not only that, right, we wrote it differently. Here we use it, here we use we. Right? We go back to subject, but we refer it to the observer, right? Not the chart again. So like in from three sentences, the start of the sentence are all written differently. That's grammar range. Okay. Now, if we talk about the lexical resources, right, we can kind of highlight the words like clear. It is clear that, of course, it is clear, right? Because if we are highlighting the main features, the important features, it's obvious. It should be obvious, right? That's the whole point. If you put something in that's not obvious, then that's a mistake, right? And then we can also see, right? So clear, see, so different contexts, different word, but pretty much says the same thing. Okay, and there's also expressions, right? Adverbs. For example, here, considerably higher, right? And in IELTS, there are just so many words, different words that you can use, right, to describe things. Like if you want to say a big increase, you can say dramatic, steep, significant. The important thing here is not to use the same thing over and over again, right? That includes, transitional phrases, right? So here the transitional phrase is different as well. Okay. Now, that's the second paragraph. No grammar mistake, but we showed grammatical range. We showed um, basically accuracy as well, right? And the lexicon also has a variety. So far looking good. So if that's the case, this up to this point, we're stabling in band 7, right? At the very least in band 7. Now, if we continue to the next paragraph, this is where it gets a lot more specific. Sorry, it gets a lot more specific. In 1900s, around 500 cubic kilometer of water was used by the agriculture sector worldwide. The figures for industrial and domestic water consumption stood around 1/5 of that amount. So we avoid repeating the same expression here. Here we use a specific number, right? And here we use a fraction, basically. Right? By 2000, global water use for agriculture had increased to around 3,000 cubic kilometer, right? Um, okay, this one we use here. I use stood around, and here I use increase. The industrial water use had risen. Right? You can see that we are not using same vocabulary over and over. It's just under half that amount. This is another fraction, right? But basically, it's written differently, just under half the amount to around 1/5 of that amount, right? Maybe that, but that's still something that we might or we could improve. And domestic consumption had reached approximately, and you can see also here, right? The adverb approximately at around, right? To around, right? So this one, two repetition. This one, two repetition. The with the numbers, right? So like I said, maximum try to kind of two repetition. Oh, actually, this is three repetitions. So again, that might push the grade just a little bit down, right? Because we want to avoid as many repetition as we can, right? But still, this is good grammar variety, good lexicon variety, precision is there as well, right? So 7 is still looks good, right? In the year 2000, the population of Brazil and the Congo were 176 million and 5.2 million respectively. Water consumption per person in Brazil at 359 cubic meter was much higher than that in the Congo at only 8 cubic meters. And this could be explained by the fact that Brazil had 265 more irrigated land. Okay. Now, there is one mistake that I would like to show you and I would highly recommend to avoid. This is for demonstration purposes, right? If you take a look at the last sentence, it's much higher than that in Congo at only 8 cubic meters. And this could be explained by the fact that Brazil had 265 times more irrigated land. Now, if you kind of take a look here, right, water consumption in Brazil, irrigated land, water consumption per person, they don't establish any connection based on the chart, right? This is something that I've mentioned before as well, something that I'm going to emphasize at the end, right? If you do this kind of analysis, right, it is very risky because the task is summary. You need to summarize what you can see from the chart, right? If you cannot see it, you should not write it, right? And this phrase, this phrase could easily be improved by simply saying that, was much higher than that in the Congo at only 8 cubic. This is emphasized by the fact that Brazil had 265 times more irrigate length. Just a simple change of word could easily improve that ending, right? Because at all costs, you should avoid assumptions and analysis. Those two are a big no-no, right? Because that's not part of the task. Okay, so let's finish the template just a little bit, right? And oops, sorry. Okay, the third paragraph, add the main features. Again, also compare main features, right? And this one, you should add specific numbers. Okay? And the fourth, right, paragraph, basically the remaining main feature. Now, if you would like, let's say, for example, after four paragraphs, you counted, oh, it's still way below 160, it's like 120 or something, right? You want to add a fifth, right? That is allowed, okay? But make sure that it's an overview. So almost like similar to the first paragraph, but just with a different perspective, right? So the first paragraph, sorry, the second paragraph, I mean, right? So the second paragraph talk about, the global water needs rose significantly between 1900s and 2000. Maybe you talk about the opposite side, right? So overall, agriculture outpaced domestic use, and in the Republic of Congo is way behind in numbers, behind Brazil, something like that, right? So if you want to add that, that's fine. But if you have already reached 160 or higher, then you do not need to add a fifth paragraph, right? This is more than sufficient. So if we kind of like avoid that last mistake, this could be a solid 8, right? More or less. But with that mistake, it might actually be just a 7. Okay, and that is one of the approaches that you can do when it comes to IELTS writing task 1. Now, do note that this is only for this type of question. In IELTS task 1, there are a lot of different a lot of different charts, illustrations. So we'll try to do another session where we look at different paragraphs, right? And we'll also take a look at more examples of really good essays, or sorry, really good answers, really bad answers, right? In the hopes that we can have a clearer understanding of the differences and the things that we should be avoiding when we are answering these questions. All right. So next session, hopefully, we'll cover the general training tasks first before we continue with academic again, for writing, of course. So if you are someone who needs that kind of tutorial, please tune in tomorrow at the same time. And don't forget, everything that I have taught today are all available in the courses that HSAD Education provides. Link in the description below. Don't forget, those courses are self-paced. You can learn them at your own pace, right? Which is the best for everyone. And in addition to that, the courses offers you a lot of self-help uh, documents, questions, templates. Right? They got a lot of templates, and it's all very detailed, explained in a detailed way. And last but not least, the courses are money back guaranteed. This is like really too good to be true. So if you fail, you don't achieve your goal, money back, no question asked. All right. Thank you so much for today. And yeah, like I said, if you want to watch a detailed tutorial on IELTS general training writing task 1, then tune in tomorrow at the same time. All right. That's my time. Thank you guys. Take care.